Your body's subtle sway can redefine what you perceive as real. Most people think focus is purely mental, right? They imagine locking down thoughts until the external world disappears. But our research shows that deep internal states aren't just achieved by thinking harder. They require your physical anchor to move in specific ways. Think of your brain like a radio receiver trying to tune into perfect clarity. If you are subtly wobbling or shifting weight, those micro movements, the input from your inner ear and balance system, are actually tuning that frequency toward peak coherence. This precise relationship between movement and neural stability is what scientists call vestibular-cortical coupling. It is the hidden grammar of presence, proving that sometimes the deepest clarity starts with a simple shift in how you stand. Think about how we feel when we are absolutely present, when the internal monologue just stops and you are anchored in reality. Scientists found that stability isn't just a mental state, it's a neurophysiological requirement. When our senses of movement integrate perfectly with specific brain networks, like the parietal cortex stabilizing alpha-theta synchrony, that is grounding presence. But when we shift slightly, when those sensory signals become unstable due to subtle changes in posture or head motion, the system reconfigures itself entirely, allowing what feels like a dissolution of ego. It's like switching from driving on a well-paved road to navigating by starlight. Your brain relies less on habit and more on raw spatial input. What if your body isn't just housing your thoughts? What if subtle changes in how you stand or move are actually rewriting how your brain perceives itself? Think of consciousness like a perfectly tuned radio station, but the antenna is your posture. When that input shifts, when we start moving subtly outside our comfort zone, the signal gets transiently unstable. This triggers something radical, a temporary breakdown of the ego structure, as if the narrative self dissolves into pure sensory data. We call this grounding presence or immanent selfhood when it stabilizes perfectly through high-fidelity vestibular-cortical integration, which means that achieving deep presence might not be about sitting still. It could simply be finding the right subtle shift in your orientation loop. And what happens to reality itself during those moments of total somatic coherence? The connection isn't just mind to body, it's a physical anchor point for your internal reality. Imagine trying to navigate an ocean while floating without any stable reference points. Our stability, our sense of self in that moment, is dictated by minute shifts in where we stand, how our head tilts, and the subtle input from gravity. When these inputs change rapidly or unexpectedly, something profound happens. Habitual thought patterns unravel. This temporal instability forces a kind of cortical remapping, disrupting your usual narrative structures. But what if not all movement leads to dissolution? There is research that argues stability only reinforces old biases. You have to see how minute sensory grammar controls the very edges of perceived reality next. We think of deep focus as just willpower, like trying not to trip over your own feet in darkness. But what if stability isn't about rigid control? What if it's a physical negotiation with the world? There is this point where subtle shifts, a tiny sway, an unexpected acceleration, can actually rewire how your brain processes reality. It seems counterintuitive until you realize these motions are forcing cortical networks out of their automatic routines. The body begins to tell the mind something entirely new about itself. This disruption starts a shift away from narrative thought toward pure integration. But what exactly happens once that boundary between internal story and external sensation dissolves? We all assume deep awareness is purely an act of focus, a deliberate effort to quiet the noise in your mind. But what if the real anchor isn't thought? What if it's movement? The brain doesn't just think itself into peace. It finds coherence through subtle shifts in how we orient ourselves, even micro adjustments in posture that barely register with us. Think of it like a gyroscope. Slight movements stabilize an otherwise chaotic system. This is the science of grounding presence, the high-fidelity connection between spatial input and deep cortical integration. It suggests that our deepest sense of self isn't something we reach for, but something we naturally tune into through how we hold ourselves in space. If subtle shifts can rewire your perception of reality itself, what does that imply about control? The feeling of being truly grounded, that sense of immanent selfhood we chase, it isn't just concentration. It is a deeply physical process. Think of your body not as a vessel, but as the ultimate tuning fork. Slight shifts in posture or subtle changes in motion actually regulate how coherent your brain waves are. When you allow small variations into your movement pattern, you stop relying on old mental scripts and start anchoring yourself directly to reality's raw signal. This neurophysiological requirement for stable self-orientation is real. Start paying attention not just to what you think, but how exactly your body holds itself in the moment. The full research archive is at jmthomasofficial.com. We have moved past the question of simply achieving a state. We are here now asking how to stabilize yourself within one. The deepest consciousness isn't just something you think into existence. It's an orientation problem, like trying to steer your ship perfectly steady on open water. Your vestibular system is that internal compass, providing high-fidelity data about where you actually are in space. When this information syncs efficiently with your brain networks, we achieve what researchers call grounding presence, a coherent resonance state. The subtle shift of a posture can modulate global brain coherence, shifting the architecture of perceived reality itself toward flow or dissolution of ego. If you want intrinsic stability, start by observing how minute postural variations affect your internal signal. The full research archive is at jmthomasofficial.com.